Hi, I'm back and we're going to talk about the chapter that you're going to read this week on environmental technology. I'll share with you a story. I'm from southeastern Michigan. I was born in Detroit, but grew up in a small town called Plymouth, Michigan, which is west of Detroit. When I was in junior high school, we had a science teacher who said Lake Erie, one of the Great Lakes, a lake that's just north of Ohio. Lake Erie was so polluted, it was a dead lake. Fish were dying, people weren't fishing there. Very few people were using it for recreation. And the reason this problem was created is because a lot of the companies in Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, and Cleveland, Ohio, were dumping toxic sludge into Lake Erie. The Canadians on the north part of the lake dumped some pollution, but they were really pretty good. But Toledo had Corning glass and several manufacturers. In fact, the river in Toledo caught on fire once and burned for several months. You had Firestone that dumped sludge into Lake Erie. But anyway, when I was in junior high school, I was told by my science teacher, along with the rest of my classmates, that Lake Erie was a dead lake and it would, in our lifetime, never come back. I graduated from high school in 1962. The year before I graduated, I went out fishing on Lake Erie with a friend. See, nature has a way of correcting itself if we stop doing it. And it's an important chapter because when we look at the environment and technology, we have to ask ourselves questions like, do we or are we willing to give up some technology to save the environment? Cell phones run on batteries, computers run on batteries. The camera I'm using right now to video this runs on a battery. We used to just have batteries and flashlights and they lasted a long time, but now we have these lithium ion batteries. And I've got them in my iPod, I've got them in my computer, I've got them, everything I use practically runs on a battery. And those batteries create pollution when we finally have to dispose of them and get rid of them. We no longer take and just throw them in the trash, or at least you shouldn't. My wife works at the Hutchinson Clinic, and so she takes the batteries there, and they have an area that disposes them, because they use a lot of batteries for things that tests that they run on your heart, where you put on monitors and you wear them around. We also have to ask ourselves, are we willing to start walking more or riding a bike and giving up our cars and trucks? Are we willing to give up those computers? Are we willing to cut back the heat? Do we want to set the temperature in our homes at 60 degrees? Maybe during the summer, when we set our air conditioner, we should set it for no lower than 80 degrees. Are we willing to give up those comforts we've come to enjoy? I'm not sure I am. We always like to talk a good game, but there's always that, as long as it's not in my backyard, we ought to do it type of an attitude that we have. So as you read through this lesson, and the discussion question I'm going to pose will have something to do with this also. But when you read this, you got to ask yourself, how much technology are you willing to give up? We used to have a cabin up north in Michigan, a friend of mine, and we used to go up there a lot. And because they had septic tanks up there, they didn't have sewers, they didn't want to run water into the septic tank very often. We used to have a motto: if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Are we willing to do that in our homes now? Are we willing to do that in school? So these are the tough questions we have to look at. Now, something completely different. I've looked at all of the projects that I have received, all of the research papers. Now remember, these are research papers. They're not opinion papers. So you've got to do some research. I've posted a discussion board. I've also posted a section under course documents where I'll put information about the project. I encourage you, if you see somebody who's got a project and you run across something that might be of interest, go to the discussion board and under the project's discussion, post that so that that can be shared with them. Now, if you're doing a multimedia project, pay close attention to the guidelines that I have posted under course documents for the project. This project or paper will account for 20% of your grade. So I want you to do a good job on it. And when I read something, I want it to be interesting. If you've all done one thing that I would encourage you to relook is you've got some pretty big topics. I'm only looking for 5 to 6 pages. So you may want to focus down on those topics into one small aspect. Anyway, if you've got any questions, send me an email. If you'd like to talk about it, we've got Skype or Adobe has a meeting place that we can use, and we can get online and we can chat with each other, and I can share some ideas with you. So until next week, have a good one. Bye-bye.